value to me. All right. So I'm sure that you guys have all heard about the big, beautiful bill. Some people have called it an ugly bill. Elon Musk infamously, and I think wisely, said that a bill cannot be big and beautiful. It can only be big or beautiful. It cannot be both. Really low-key sounded like a founding father, right? I'm not like the biggest Elon Musk fan in the world, but you know, he's pretty dialed in. He's sort of nailed it when it comes to that front. But I did want to sort of cover the big key items that were listed inside of the Big Beautiful Bill Act. And thankfully, the BBC went and did a nice little summary for us to read. I was considering diving into the Wikipedia article, but there's too many things in this bill. And, you know, I'm not a fan of that at all. Actually, I could look this up. Big Beautiful Bill. Wait, what the heck is this? What? I have never. Okay. Oh my goodness. Yeah. No. That's so weird. But Big Beautiful Bill. Imagine if that's what gets me banned. Never mind. Skip it. Erase. Yeah, the Big Beautiful Bill truly is a monstrosity when it comes to how many things are included. Now, this is one of the things that, you know, as usual, makes me upset with Speaker Mike Johnson, because he was elected as Speaker of the House to not be doing all these massive ominous bills, but he was like, yo, we're going to be voting on things in itemized fashions. We're going to be voting on each individual thing so that the people who voted on these representatives could have the ability to have their voices heard on individual items, rather than this whole omnibus thing where it's like, oh, you got to vote for all of it or you got to vote against all of it. But bro, if you look at all of these provisions, this is insane. And whoever summarized all of this did a good job, because it's literally 900 pages long. And these are just the provisions. We've got the removed provisions as well. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely insane. Way too many things inside of this bill. But let's dig into the key aspects of this bill for sure, to take a look at sort of like the things that might have the biggest impact. So this is from the BBC. It says here, U.S. President Donald Trump's budget mega bill is set to become law after it passed a final vote in the House of Representatives. The president is now poised to sign the bill into law during a ceremony on Friday. Its advancement has not been easy. The legislation has stoked disputes among lawmakers of Trump's own Republican Party, who control both chambers of Congress over social programs and spending levels. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the bill could add $3.3 trillion to federal deficits over the next 10 years and leave millions without health coverage, a forecast that the White House disputes. I'm not quite sure which of those things is disputed, because I've heard both things repeated from people on both sides of the aisle. You know, so I'm not sure how accurate that is. And I think that people made a list of each state saying how many people would lose health care coverage. I'm not sure how accurate that is. And as we read through this, it just adds provisions to healthcare, like, oh, you know, if you're such a demographic, you have to be working in order to get Medicaid or Medicare or whatever. So those people might start working, and then they wouldn't lose their healthcare. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure how true that is, but you know, it's a fair thing to point out that you're putting in these provisions. During a vote in the U.S. Senate earlier this week, Vice President J.D. Vance was forced to cast the tie-breaking vote in order to pass the bill. The legislation's prospects in the House appeared precarious. However, Republican rebels eventually got on board to support it following hours of wrangling on Thursday. Here is a look at some of the key items and hotly debated issues in the bill. By the way, I do want to say it's kind of interesting that people were fighting and arguing about the bill for over a week, arguing and stuff, and at the end of the day, the bill got signed by Congress or whatever, got voted in by both chambers of Congress, on like late on July 3rd, in time for Donald Trump to sign it on the 4th of July. So people were sort of like, it's a bad optics look for it to take so long to pass. To me, I sort of wonder if this was even on purpose to bring everything down to have the bill be signed by Congress, bill be passed by Congress on the 3rd so that Trump could sign it on the 4th. Like, honestly, I don't know if Trump could have asked for a better like bang bang play. Like, let's say that it gets like passed by Congress and then it's sitting like just waiting for him to sign it for like a week and a half. Like, what? That's not cool, and that's not flashy or stylish in the way that Trump would like. So, you know, people have sort of tried to portray it as like a bad optics look. For me, it's like, well, I think it sort of gave the intended result that Donald Trump wanted. This is the big thing that, like, especially when this big beautiful bill was first brought up, this is the first big thing that I had heard of. It says extension of 2017 Trump tax cuts. During his first term, Trump had signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which lowered taxes for corporations and individuals across most income brackets. Trump had touted the law as one that would stimulate economic growth, but experts have argued that it has benefited wealthy Americans the most. Right? See, so experts have not said that it hasn't stimulated economic growth. Notice that, right? I love the Weasley language there. Where it's like, very clearly they want you to be mad that people richer than you are getting even richer, right? They want to gloss over the fact that the goal was to stimulate economic growth. They want to gloss over the fact that, you know, clearly they can't cite experts who say that it hasn't stimulated economic growth, but they want you to be mad that some people richer than you are getting even richer, right? So, of course, this is the capitalist in me coming out, right? You know, I have nothing against the billionaires or whatever, but you know, kind of interesting how that is all slanted, isn't it? I was sort of debating about whether or not I should even react to a BBC article. I was like, oh, maybe the BBC might be biased. They're like to the left. They've had some slanted coverage on some things. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a bit more independent and therefore maybe a little bit more fair than American articles about the whole situation. And also, it's not going to focus on things that are as politically charged here, right? There might be things that are quite relevant that are included in this article that would not be included in something like AP News, for example, because it's not as politically charged, and therefore you know, people in like Britain or whatever might find it more interesting. No, that's not the right way to put it. But the BBC is not going to be as distracted by hot button political issues as something like AP News would be, and so they're not going to focus as much time on the hot button issues at the expense of other things that are still important. So yeah. Continuing to go here, it says key provisions of that law are set to expire in December, but the sprawling budget bill currently before lawmakers aims to make those tax cuts permanent. It also increases standard deductions by $1,000 for individuals and $2,000 for married couples until 2028. So I had heard that this bill had no new tax cuts or whatever. I guess that's not entirely true. I also heard some folks on the left that had a bunch of tax cuts for the rich. Right, I was listening to the whole speech by who was it? Was it Cory Booker? Or maybe it was another bald black Democrat. Let me see. Cory Booker speech. Was it Cory Booker? Let me see. Marathon speech. Okay, he's not entirely bald. Not entirely bald, to be fair. So I have to clarify my statement. But Hakeem Jeffries, yeah, he's not bald, he's balding. He's not bald, he's balding. But Hakeem Jeffries did this whole marathon speech talking about how it's going to be like give tax cuts to the rich, whatever. Not true. It extends existing tax cuts that are in place right now to the rich. So at least from here, no new taxes for rich people. Maybe I'm wrong here. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here about that. So next item here Steep cuts to Medicaid. To finance tax cuts elsewhere, Republicans have additional. Wait, what other tax cuts? Oh, there are more tax cuts, but just not the rest necessarily. We'll get to that later. To help finance tax cuts elsewhere, Republicans have added additional restrictions to Medicaid, the health care program relied upon by millions of disabled and low-income Americans. This is true. I want to say it's Americans. I've heard some disputes about whether or not this is for Americans or illegals. Not sure. But people living in America, yes, some people are getting cut from Medicaid. One of the changes is a new work requirement for childless adults without disabilities. Another change to Medicaid is shifting re-enrollment from once a year to every 6 months and adding income and residency verifications. I will say, if you're going to cut funding to make up for tax cuts, I don't know if Medicaid is where I would do that, to be honest. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of, federally funded healthcare, whatever, but I do think it should be an option for people. And I think it's really good that we do have a safety net for people who can't work or can only make low wages or whatever. So Medicaid is one of the last things I would cut, honestly. I'm not on board with cutting Medicaid. Like, for example, and to be fair, I understand the division. Like, I see division because actually healthcare is what we spend the most money on in the United States of America. We spend more money on Medicaid than we do on the federal, the military industrial complex. Let that sink in, right? Pretty crazy. But I would actually cut funding to the military industrial complex before I would cut funding to Medicaid, largely because we're not really in any conflict or any war. I don't think that we are likely to be in a hot war. Looking at how things are going on right now, especially at least in the next year or so. And also, frankly, lastly and most importantly, a lot of federal funding goes to R&D for stuff that we don't even have yet. It's just like experiments and things, people tinkering in hangars. So I don't think that we would even miss the funding that we would be pulling from the military industrial complex. So I would rather do that than cut Medicaid. Now, I will say that states, probably would be able to pick up some of the slack of the lost healthcare coverage, theoretically, but it'd be harder for them to do because the state's smaller, so it's harder sources of income. Maybe they'll raise taxes to cover the cost of Medicaid in their states. That's certainly a reasonable solution to this problem. But I just am not on board with the cuts for Medicaid. There had to have been something else that they could have cut before Medicaid. I understand that the federal spending on healthcare is like the most expensive thing in the budget, but still, bro, like, I don't know, maybe we could build like a few less ICBMs. I don't know. But let's keep going here. It says here there are also lower provider taxes which states use to help fund their share of Medicaid costs from 6% to 3.5% by 2025. There are also lower provider taxes. I see. So this is a federal tax that goes to the states to fund Medicaid costs. That's kind of messed up, because they would need even more funding, I would imagine, not less. So this is not a great provision. I'm not a fan of this. Complaints from some Republicans in states that draw funding from these taxes, especially for rural hospitals, led the Senate to delay the cuts and add a $50 billion rural hospital fund. What? Wait, what? This is silly. This is kind of silly. This is like let's say that like I'm getting taxed by, like, let's say I have a phantom tax, okay? Or whatever, where it's like some overlord or whatever is being like, oh, whenever you get like a snack or whatever, you need to give me like one piece of your snack or whatever. And it's like me getting mad. It's like, oh, I have fewer things now because you keep on taking my snacks. Can you just not take my snacks? And they're like, no, but you know what? Once a month, I'll give you $1. It's like, I understand I'm getting some value back, But why not just cut less? Just take less from me rather than giving me something else. It just feels like a weird game. And I think this fund it's more of a fact that like this fund is going to be something in the future where, excuse me, either if there are more cuts to Medicaid, that more money is going to go into the hospital fund, so it's a safety net for these states who are worried about losing fund in the future. But also, it's very possible that people just throw money into this rural hospital fund if they feel like funding Medicaid more than they already do. So I don't like this as a solution. It's kind of silly. It feels like it could be used for political games. I think they should have just cut less rather than being like, oh, we're going to cut this amount of money and then we're going to give some money to you guys. Like, I don't know what that's about, man. That's crazy. The next paragraph says here, the Senate bill also proposes tightening eligibility requirements so that able-bodied adults with children aged 15 and older would need to work or volunteer at least 80 hours a month. I like the spirit of this, right? Even in the scriptures it says, he who does not work does not eat, or whatever. So I'm down with the principle, but at the same time, it's not the easiest thing in the world to find a job that will give you 80 hours a month, especially if you're at such a low income level. Well, actually, hold on, wait a second. Maybe I'm wrong. 80 hours a month. 40 hours a week is like the standard. So I guess the bare minimum that you could work, let me pull up a calculator here. 80 hours a month would equal 3 hours a day for the whole month, averaging. Maybe let's say you round up there about 4 hours in every single month. Maybe rounding up to say they're like 4 weeks in every month, more or less. I don't even know how I would calculate the math right now. I'm maybe too tired to crunch all the numbers. But $80 a month actually doesn't sound that bad. Actually, you know what? If we there are about 4 weeks in a month. So how many hours per week is this? I think it would be the best way to calculate this. 20 hours a week. Not horrible. I do know some people with with part-time jobs where they're like, man, they're only giving me 10 hours this week. So I think maybe that number is a little bit too high, right? I think that if you work like 10, maybe let's say like 10 or 15 hours per week, that would be like a good cutoff. But I like the principle, right? Right? You shouldn't be just getting free stuff from the government if you're not doing anything. Now, if you're unable to work, that's one thing. But we're talking about able-bodied adults here. So, I don't think there's too much of an excuse to not work. Even if you have a rich uncle. All right, the next paragraph here, it says the Senate Medicaid work requirement is said to be the strictest ever proposed by Republicans, raising the odds that large numbers of Americans could lose medical coverage as they will not keep up with the new paperwork. Well, hey, bro, if you're not keeping up with the new paperwork, that's on you, buddy. But I do think it's very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what this does to the Republican base, because, and I've talked about this before, is that as much as Republicans are like, oh no, we don't like the handouts or whatever, a lot of those same Republicans do get handouts, and they actually don't like them when they don't like to lose what they get, and they don't mind getting free stuff from the government actually. So what the Republicans don't like about that is that it means more taxes. A lot of working class people don't really like more taxes. So, it'd be really interesting to see if Republican voters get mad at Republicans for doing things that would kick them off of healthcare, or if they're still willing to like hold on to the principle of we are giving too much money for these handouts. and therefore end up sticking with the Republican Party and not breaking with them on that. So really interesting to see if this chips away at the Republican base. Next paragraph. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that nearly 12 million Americans could lose their health coverage by the end of the next decade as a result of these changes. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see. Now, some of these things, more or less, seem like things that you could work your way out of. Right? You can work your way out of. So, people could certainly adjust and keep their Medicaid. I think that's something that people are not really factoring in. It's like the people who are not working, just not changing their habits and then losing Medicaid is completely different than, being like, hey guys, you need to work now that people start working. So in a year or two, I'd like to come back and see how many people started working after this got passed and signed into law. Coming up next, we have Social Security taxes. So let's see what this paragraph here says. On the campaign trail, Trump vowed to eliminate taxes on Social Security income, monthly payments to Americans of retirement age, and people with disabilities. The bill fell short of delivering on that promise, but it did temporarily increase the standard deduction of up to $4,000 for individuals 65 and over. That deduction will be in place from 2025 to 2028. Senate Republicans approved an extension of Social Security tax breaks and an increase that would grant a $6,000 tax deduction for older Americans who earn no more than $75,000 a year. This is an interesting decision. And I'm not sure why they have decided to do this because, taxes on Social Security income. Yeah, I'm not sure why they decided to do this because Social Security is a program that is losing money. And now the federal government's like, well, we're going to take even less income from this enterprise that's losing money. Now, I understand, actually, you know what? I think I agree with this, actually. I agree with this because Social Security is a check that's supposed to come from the federal government. Why is the government paying you and then saying, hey, you've got to pay me some of the things that I gave you? Like, that doesn't make sense. You can maybe decrease the amount that you're giving to the people, but it's again some of those games where it's like, I'm giving you something and then you got to give me a little bit of what you just gave me back. It's like, nah, that's silly. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But by the way, the whole Social Security thing is a mess. I think that they need to. I think they could actually fix Social Security if they just say no more Social Security benefits to anyone born after this particular date, and 16 years after that, no new Social Security. Keep on doing Social Security taxes because you've got to fund the next batch of Social Security handouts. But let's say like New Year's Eve this year, anyone born after that date can no longer is no longer eligible to get a Social Security check in the future. And then everyone is still paying into the system, but it's fewer people to support. And I think that might help with the fact that Social Security is running a deficit every year. So that needs to be fixed. But, this provision, I think it's fine. There's no need to tax a federal handout like that. How much sense does that make? Next up, we have increasing state and local tax deductions. The bill increases the deduction limit for state and local taxes. There is currently a $10,000 cap on how much taxpayers can deduct from the amount they owe in federal taxes. That expires this year. The Senate's approved bill raises it from $10,000 to $40,000, but after 5 years, it would return to $10,000. That's kind of cool. I don't know how many people who are like, I don't know how many average Americans this would benefit, but I think certainly there are going to be a lot of people in like the upper middle class ranges who are going to love this. I think this is great for them. Salt taxes were a big sticky point in the House, especially Republican holdouts in some Democratic-controlled urban areas. The House's version of the spending bill did not include a 5-year limit, so the Senate's changes could pose a problem for some House Republicans. cuts to food benefits. Reforms have also been added to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is used by over 40 million low-income Americans. The Senate bill would continue to fully fund the benefits for states that have an error payment rate below 6%, but states with higher error rates would be on the hook for anywhere between 5% to 15% of the program's costs. The change would start in 2028. The Senate bill also adds work requirements for able-bodied SNAP enrollees who do not have dependents. Now, this is interesting because I am all on board for cutting SNAP. There are way too many things eligible to be purchased through SNAP, and I think that that's all like government subsidized, right? So if you got rid of like half of the things that are covered by SNAP, then that I think would sort of cut how much money the government is spending on SNAP. Now, the problem is though, and then here's the problem I have with SNAP. My problem with SNAP is that there are tons of unhealthy things included in SNAP, and I think there are like healthy foods that are not included in SNAP. We need to remove stuff like, hold on, there's no reason that like I could get this can and probably get it on SNAP. I could probably get this American flag Coca-Cola zero sugar can from the dollar store from SNAP. Now, I love Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola tastes great. Zero sugar, probably the best zero sugar soda on the planet. And this can, man, it looks nice. This is a tasty treat. It tastes real nice. But you know what? It's not something that you need to live, right? SNAP should be giving you access to things that you need to live, or things that will be beneficial to your health and well-being. So like things that include like protein and stuff, for example, like eggs and stuff. And I'm sure eggs is covered under SNAP. But do you need a bag of potato chips to live, right? No one is going to look at like a poor starving family and be like, oh no, they can't get any Lay's potato chips. Like, no. The things that are covered by SNAP need to be things that are actually healthy for you. And I'm really disappointed that like RFK Jr. didn't use his influence and pull to sort of get companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Frito-Lay's, whatever, pulled from the SNAP program, because they really shouldn't be in there. And honestly, it's probably one of the biggest things contributing to the obesity crisis that we're seeing in the United States right now, is all of these unhealthy foods being covered and subsidized by the United States government and making it more accessible for ordinary Americans to have. When, if these things were covered by SNAP, a lot of people wouldn't be getting those bags of Doritos or whatever, and getting all these Monster energy drinks and all these things that are very unhealthy for you. Instead they might be going for some healthier options because it's free and subsidized, and therefore they don't need to spend any money on it. So I'm cool with cutting SNAP, but this is not the SNAP cut that we need. I don't think this is not the change that we need to see in the world, unfortunately. So, and I don't even know. This seems like fixing rounding errors, which I mean, fine. Certainly hold people accountable who are either misusing government funds or losing government funds. That's fair, but this is not what I want to see. When I hear, oh, we're changing SNAP, what I want to hear is like, you can't get Coke from SNAP anymore, or you can't get chips with SNAP anymore. Not like, oh, we're fixing rounding errors. Like, I mean, by all means do that, but like, that's not what I'm asking you to do primarily. Now this one's cool. Boost to defense and border spending. The BBC states, the U.S. military will receive a budget increase of $150 billion under the bill. The money will be used to bolster the armed forces' shipbuilding capacity, as well as to fund Trump's Golden Dome missile defense project. Interesting. I need to look into that. I haven't heard too much about that, but I have heard it mentioned in passing over the past couple of days. I've kind of been like not following politics as closely as I typically do over the past week, but I have heard of the Golden Dome. Not sure entirely what it is, but it sounds kind of interesting. It will also significantly increase funding for immigration enforcement by allocating $100 billion to immigration and customs enforcement. The agency central to the Trump administration's efforts to crack down on illegal immigration. Now, I've heard people say, oh, why does ICE need this much money? Well, I've heard that the main reason why they're doing this is so that ICE doesn't have to come begging for money in years down the line when they run out of funding if you give them the normal amount of funds for an additional year. I think one problem with this is that this could lead to the $100 billion getting wasted, getting pocketed by middle managers or whatever. So, you know, kind of like what we see with overfunding public school systems, right? Like throwing money at a program doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get better. Also, I don't know if I trust the government enough to steward the $100 billion well, right? Like Social Security, which is a very simple program, has basically sort of like, it has basically gone bankrupt. So I hope that they hold on to the $100 billion for the amount of time that they should. You know, I hope that they don't waste it. But in general, you know, beefing up funding for ICE and for Customs and Border Patrol, I think is a really good thing. So I am more or less on board with increasing funding to these departments. The additional funding, which will run until 2029, will be used to nearly double migrant detention capacity in the U.S. and hire more enforcement personnel. Prior to the bill, the existing annual budget for ICE was about $8 billion. Oh, wow. That's impressive. That's impressive. And this is cool because one thing is we have leftist loonies out here trying to dox ICE agents to it's basically a form of domestic terrorism, right? They want to get some people to scare them into not being ICE agents anymore. But I think that with this additional funding, now ICE, if they want to, they could like triple they could triple the salary for ICE agents, and that makes things like a lot more appealing for someone who's, you know, considering being an ICE agent. It's like, you know what, you know, I might get some haters, I might get harassed, right, by some leftist loonies, but hey, you know, I got a big fat paycheck to give to my family back home, you know. So, you know, that's a cool move. I do dig that. I do dig that. The funding boost now makes ICE the largest federal law enforcement agency, according to the nonprofit Brennan Center for Justice. That's kind of cool. No tax on overtime tips. Sorry, no tax on overtime or tips and other elements. The no tax on tips provision in the budget bill would mark a win for one of Trump's promises during the campaign. The Senate bill, being considered by the House, would allow individuals to deduct a certain amount of tip, wages, and overtime from their taxes. However, they propose gradually phasing out those benefits based on annual income, starting at $150,000 for individuals and $300,000 for joint filers. Now, one thing that is cool is, you know, if we go back up here to the Medicaid cuts, Donald Trump has said several times that he was not going to cut Medicaid. He was not going to touch Medicaid. He didn't want to touch Medicaid. This is a campaign promise that he has sort of like gone back on, right? He lied. He did not deliver what he said that he would deliver, right? Which was no cuts to Medicaid. He does not want to touch it. And I'm really surprised that more people aren't sort of holding his feet to the fire on that, because it's one of the most obvious violations of a campaign promise that I've seen from Donald Trump, like ever. Like, it's huge. Like, not huge, but it's like very obvious, because he said it so many times he didn't want to cut Medicaid. I could actually probably find a compilation video of Trump saying that he wasn't going to touch Medicaid. In here, he's bragging about it here. Trump Medicaid cuts. Let's see. Yeah, hold on. Wait, I found some state-run propaganda. Literally lying a month ago. Look at this.
Here's what I want on Medicaid. We're not touching anything. All I want is one thing. 3 words. We don't want any waste, fraud, or abuse. Very simple. Waste, fraud, abuse. Other than that, we're leaving it. Medicare, we're leaving it. All we're after, and this is for the good of it, is a lot of...
Oh, so is this a loop?
Waste, fraud, and abuse. That's all we're doing. We're not touching.
Yeah, so he lied. He lied there. That wasn't true. And look, hold on. We've got another clip here.
Tonight, President Trump's sweeping bill slashing taxes for the wealthy and boosting spending for immigration enforcement.
Which is a lie. I think there are no new cuts there. Hold on. Yeah.
Fraud and abuse?
No.
Saying that the estimated 11.8 million.
Oh, this is good.
He now insists the cuts in the bill only target waste, fraud, and abuse.
This is good because usually, you know, I feel like the media, they try to get Trump in gotcha questions, but this is a good question to ask him. I'm really glad that they sort of have held his feet to the fire here. Let's take a look at how he answers this question.
Are you saying that the estimated 11.8 million people who could lose their health coverage, that is all waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's going to be a very much smaller number than that, and that number will be waste, fraud, and abuse.
What?
Oh, so a month ago he was like, we're not going to touch it. Now he's like, it's going to be a small number, believe me.
What number is that? What analysis are you seeing?
I'm not seeing a number, but I know it's much less than the number you gave.
Which is true, probably. You know, the majority of the cuts are relating to like work requirements, and if people are looking and saying like, oh, if I don't work, I'm going to lose healthcare from the government, you know, they might start working. So I think that Trump is right, but he still lied. He still lied about whether or not he wanted to cut or whether or not he was going to cut Medicaid. You know, for this type of thing, if I'm in his position, right, let's say that the whole Congress is like, we're not going to pass any spending bill unless it has a cut to Medicaid in it. Well, first of all, I would stall. If there's a deadline, I'd push it for like a week or two if I was in Trump's shoes. And then I would go to the American people and be like, hey guys, we've got the situation. Congress is refusing to pass this bill without cutting Medicaid. You know, what do you guys think I should do? Sort of take the pulse of the American people. The American people are like, you know what? I know you guys said you weren't going to cut Medicaid, but we're okay with it now. Go ahead and cut Medicaid. Then I feel like it's a fine thing to do. But in general, I don't really like it when presidents or politicians in general go back on their word. So that is a big L for me when it comes to Donald Trump. Now, to give him credit where credit is due, he did, hold on, where were we? Credit where credit is due, he did deliver on the no tax on tips promise. So I got to give him credit for that. I got to be balanced. Let's see here. It says it would expire in 2028. The Senate legislation would also permanently increase a child tax credit to $2,200, which is $300 less than what House lawmakers had eyed. The House version required both parents have a Social Security number, but the Senate okayed a requirement of only one parent. Let's see here. The upper chamber's bill also proposes raising the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. Oh my goodness, I hate that. More than the $4 trillion approved by the House last month. The debt ceiling is the limit on the amount of money the U.S. government can borrow to pay its bills. Lifting the debt limit allows the government to pay for programs already approved by Congress. Clean energy incentives reduction. One of the most notable divisions between House and Senate Republicans is the Senate's proposal for clean energy tax breaks. Although both call for an end to the Biden-era federal clean energy tax credits, Senate Republicans approve phasing them out more slowly. For instance, the Senate has extended the runway for businesses that build wind and solar farms to still benefit from the tax credits. However, both the Senate and the House versions seek to deny the credits to companies whose supply chains may have ties to foreign entities of concern, such as China. This is protectionism. I don't really like protectionist policies, but I understand the fears of being entangled with China. I just think that the solution to this is not punishing companies for working with China, but make it more appealing to produce things in the United States of America, not through exclusion, but just by making America a better place to manufacture such goods. I guess there's a limit to how much you can do that, of course, because you got slavery in China. But still, there's got to be something you can do beyond protectionism when it comes to tax credits and tax breaks. Because, one thing I hate about tax credits to business and things is it's basically you admitting, hey, our country or our state or whatever is not a good enough place for you to do business here. We have to entice you with these other goods in order to make you want to be here. So, it says here, although both, let's see. Companies that begin construction this year could qualify for the full tax break. That drops to 60% if they begin construction in 2026 and 20% if they begin in 2027. The credit would disappear in 2028. I guess that it advises people to speed things up, but I do think that there should maybe still be some credits in the, well, not a big fan of credits at all, but it's very interesting that they all phase out by 2028, right? Because that's the next presidential election cycle. But that's how these things tend to go, you know. Let's see. The House version of the bill sought to end the tax breaks for those companies almost immediately. Estimated increases in savings in the U.S. federal spending from the bill. Cumulative cost increases over 10 years. Tax cut extensions, $4.5 trillion. Defense, $150 billion. Borders, under $29 billion. Total savings over 10 years, $390 billion. Green energy, $488 billion. Food benefit, $287 billion. You know, it kind of stinks because, like, you know, these cuts in these in the new spending, they don't really match, right? There are a lot more cuts than there are savings. There's a lot more cost to the federal government through loss of income with tax cuts than there is like money available to spend on the handouts. But you know, at the end, I don't know. We have to get our spending under control at the federal level. You know, I'm not mad that we spend money on healthcare, but there's got to be a way that we can balance the budget. You know, Bill Clinton was able to pull it off. I feel like Bill Clinton could pull off you know, something that Donald Trump could not do. I feel like it's a little bit embarrassing for Donald Trump, or whoever the modern current president is. But in general, this bill seems to be a mixture of good and bad. A lot of people are making it out to be just something horrible. This is going to kill a bunch of people, when that's not really an accurate assessment of what the bill is going to be like in its totality. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. But if you got some other things that you would like me to talk about that are included in the bill, certainly leave a comment down below, and I'd be happy to analyze that, because the bill is huge. The bill is sprawling and has a whole bunch of stuff in it. So definitely would be willing to cover those things in the future as well.